Now live from London, England, episode 9 of the Consulting Puff podcast. This week Alisdair is joined by Jeet Poptani SAP Program Director and AI Technologist to discuss helping mid-tier organizations embrace and excel with SAP SaaS ERP. Sit back and enjoy.
Dragon ERP help mid-tier leadership teams shape their SAP transformation journey. Request your copy of our SAP SaaS ERP Mid-Tier Customer Adoption Guide.
Welcome to another edition of Consulting Puff. Today we are going to talk about SAP and the mid-tier. So do you want to just introduce yourself, Jeet, to those who don't know you?
Yeah, so my name is Jeet Poptani. 20 years managing digital transformation programs across UK, Europe, and rest of the world. I specialized in implementing and rolling out SAP solutions and products and services.
Fantastic. So, and the reason we're having this conversation today is because we do a lot of talking and supporting each other in terms of SAP delivery. And we've got mid-tier stuff underway and you've got mid-tier stuff underway. And I thought it'd be really good to share some insights. At Dragon, we've developed our own offering, which I'll talk about. And we've also developed, and I've written, took me about 2 years to do it, a downloadable playbook for customers seeking to adopt what we call SAP SaaS ERP. And I think that's the first interesting point, Jeet, is in terms of how SAP are now rebranding SAP S/4HANA Public Cloud to SaaS ERP. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And this is coming a very long way. I still remember my early days in SAP when they came up with the concept of SaaS-based application. This was their BYD was their first product long back 20 years ago. And since then, it has come a long way. And we are seeing this ERP. What's effectively happening is SAP is gearing towards more around the SaaS-based application where it's cheaper for the customers to run the SAP application, but more so is cost-effective, scalable, and standardized as well. The way the SAP is gearing up to, what they're looking is more of a SaaS-based application where they have this regular updates that are going along. And then most of it, especially the managing the security, all the overheads that we had in the normal on-prem or the other versions of the SAP that are being taken care of during the public cloud as well. And one of the key things that I want to add that why this is happening is also a flavor of AI as well. So AI, as we know, is coming up. I think it's maturing every day. With the public cloud, there are upgrades that are happening twice a year. So what SAP is trying to do is trying to automate some of those business processes as well. And with each new update, they're adding in more features. And that's what their long-term goal is, to have that standardized public cloud SaaS-based application where they continue to roll. Yeah.
So let's just unpack what we're talking about a little bit more. So let's just unpack it. So I think the first point is, as you say, SAP have now got 2 mid-tier SaaS ERP products. We've got By Design and we've got S/4HANA Public, which are now rebranding. And I think the S4 is top down. So it's really the bigger mid-tier organizations. So your 1 billion's going back down. Maybe revenue of 500 million is sort of like the sweet spot. And then all the way to the bottom, By Design, sort of maybe 50 million revenue up. So there's that sort of like differential. I think the SaaS product base sort of like touches 50 to 500. But I think SAP S/4HANA Public could go right up and support very, very large organizations. Example being sort of like KPMG as an example, if it needs to. I mean, City of London have just done a deal on S/4HANA Public. So, but I think there's a bit which says By Design is at the bottom end of mid-tier, S4 is at the top. I think there's another observation, which is, as you say, It's all cloud-centric. SAP's strategy is by the end of 2025 was to be 100% cloud. But it's not going to get there because of the ECC resistance, but it doesn't matter. But I think there's a theme developing, and that is on by design. Okay, they've stopped doing development in the core ERP application. Okay, and all the innovation now for by design is coming out of BTP. So the AI, the analytics, all the good stuff comes out of BTP. And I think what we're going to see with S/4HANA public cloud is that sooner or later, I think sooner, you're going to get to the point whereby, from a process perspective, it's as good as it's going to get. It's going to be a very, very expensive SAP footprint, because I even saw GRC got included the other day. So it's very expensive. And then the focus is going to switch to industry bolt-ons from the partner ecosystem, but it's all going to be cloud still.
Yeah.
And I think you're going to see more and more of the innovation sitting outside of the core ERP.
Yeah.
And you're going to see a very, very stable ERP. So I think what we've seen happen with by design is going to happen with S4 Public. I think there's another point, which is SAP have now reinstated Business Suite. So, for the bigger customers. So Business Suite's back, and it's really talking about, as you said, all of the SAP product portfolio, which in general is all cloud-based other than some of the stuff around S4. It's all now cloud-based. So it's a very rich cloud architecture. Business Suite touches everything from CX. So you've got CX, Business Suite, you've got SuccessFactors, you've got S4, you've got IBP, you've got a very broad cloud base. And I think that's interesting. And it's all linked together by BTP. But when you drop down into the mid-tier, okay, and this is the first observation, is that SAP, it seems to me, didn't listen to their mid-tier partners, because they've made a big play about the customer needs to adopt a cloud mindset. But what I see of the mid-tier customer base is that they've already got a cloud mindset. So they are very cloud-centric in terms of they're happy to link together lots of little cloud applications, cheap as chips, link them all together, which emulate SAP's Business Suite. And they're really cloud-centric. And I think the problem statement I'm seeing to start off with is that when a customer adopts S4 Public or by design, there isn't a rich tapestry of out-the-box APIs which support all the other standard cloud apps that the mid-tiers tend to use. Have you seen that as a blocker?
I mean, that's what SAP has taken. They have taken very simplistic view of it. So where they are standardizing the processes and assuming that most of even the mid-tier as well, businesses will start adopting it in terms of the way that's being provided. But one of the key thing that I have observed is, like, even though in terms of the revenues, as that's the way we are measuring it, it might be small, but from the supply chain perspective, the logistics perspective, from the manufacturing perspective, and the way our the whole procurement and buying and selling of components is related, it is still the same. So for the big clients, it's like, yes, the volume is quite high, the frequency is high, but even for the smaller customers, mid-tier customers as well, they still need to integrate with their native systems like Ariba, Concur, and those sort of things. But at the same time, there's also a need to integrate with MES and the other manufacturing systems as well.
Yeah, because what I'm seeing is that a lot of the mid-tier see SAP as a system of record, really good for general ledger. But then immediately they do FP&A in data rails. Immediately they look to do P2P in something else. immediately look to do travel and expenses, something else. They might be risk management.
Yeah.
There are cheaper manufacturing systems, quality management systems. So what I'm seeing is that a bit of a composable federated model in the mid-tier, in that they make some use of SAP, but not full use. And I think, and I'd like to get your view about this, is that there's still a perception across the mid-tier that SAP is difficult to implement and difficult to adopt. What's your view on that?
So, I mean, SAP is making it quite simple. Then what they're saying is go standard, and even they've got stats where you can quickly implement it. Again, that is true if the companies are willing to go absolute vanilla and they want to adopt the standard processes. But the moment they start to include the other items from the localization, statutory requirements, connecting to their other systems that they're using for their manufacturing, and also on the delivery side of it, then that's where it gets complex, basically. And we have seen time and again, it's not the standard SAP which takes time, it's the integration, it's the data that is migration of the data. I think those are the topics that generally make any that define the length of the overall transformation.
Okay, so you're right. But if I did a rat-a-tat-tat very quickly off the top of my head, I would say, why do all SAP programs fail? Big, small, mid-tier, Fortune, Global 100, doesn't matter. Why do these programs fail? They fail because the customer doesn't understand them as is. They don't really spend the time to define their required outcomes. They don't map their target operating model. Okay. And then what they really struggle with is that they don't have the internal capacity and capability to do a full end-to-end ERP drop. So they just don't have that.
I mean, this is really good point, and this is the core of it. I think that needs to be clarified, and these are the prerequisites for a good transformation program. And somehow it has been assumed that these things are already in place. So even the estimation that is provided by the SI partner or SAP for that matter, they assume that the new targeting operating model is already in place, that these processes are in place, there's a documentation that is available. Just assume that all these prerequisites, which are the part of the prep phase, they're already there, and then they start to identify in terms of that they provide the overall timelines and everything as well. I think that needs to be addressed as well. So even though the customers who are trying to adopt the public cloud, they still need to make sure that these prerequisites are met before they actually get on to this the journey of transformation.
I think you're right. I mean, in my playbook, our guide for implementing a mid-tier ERP, I think I came up with 45 major points that the business needs to think about before they even start. So these are all the things you need to do in terms of phase 0 to build up your business case. And I think one of the things became very, very clear to me is we always talk about you must have C-level sponsorship. So you've got to have the sponsorship. They've got to be very, very clear about the why. And that's important. But so that's 2 points done, but it's still the other 43 points which have got to be delivered after that. And one of the things we worked on, sort of like we built out in Dragon, is that we came to the conclusion that we could implement General Ledger and FP&A probably in 6 weeks. Okay, we can do that, and that would mean working with the CFOs in terms of standardization and moving to standard SAP chart of accounts, aligning around cost centers, all the sort of like finance structure stuff, to the point whereby you could do the general ledger, you could close, and then you could push it into an FP&A tool, and then that's enough. And that would be it would take 3 months to do that, because you'd then train, you'd embed and sustain, you do all that stuff. So it got me thinking, and we've ended up with like a modular approach to S/4HANA Public and by Design, which I call Foundation, which is you put in your general ledger first. So you have all those conversations where here's all the 45 points you need to run through, but we'll just do it for finance. So it sort of like defines the strategy, defines the TOM, does all the enterprise structure stuffs, enables them to focus on data, roles and auths, really build out the target operating model. And therefore, by the time you come to just setting up SAP, it's pretty much not a major. Then you're straight into your test, your change, you deploy, and then you stabilize. So then we came to the conclusion that for most organizations just don't have the capacity and capability to do a big bang.
Yeah.
So we ended up with a foundation strategy which says, look, every quarter you can do a release. So you start with your finance and you just keep building. So you might start with finance procurement, then you could possibly add inventory, then you could add manufacturing and quality, or you might want to add service. Do you know what I mean? But you'd layer cake it so that you do bite-sized chunks. You'd almost follow the enterprise architecture strategy of bite-sized chunks, nudging strategy. So it's incremental. So it might take 2 years to do the whole thing, but you have a working system in sort of like 3 months.
Yeah.
What's your view about that? So in terms of going big bang, you still got the customers getting value from almost day one, and they're building it out as they go along.
I mean, that's one of the key benefits as well, I see, because in public cloud as well, because it's almost like a buffet of a lot of different items, and it has the capability to integrate and add in stuffs as well. So there are a lot of features which are, again, it all depends upon what versions you use, base version or premium versions, depending upon your licensing that you do with the SAP. Based on that, there are a lot of features that you can add in. So let's say the first version is almost setting up. I think that's what I generally refer it like. So whenever you're doing your first transformation, the first phase of it is getting that platform ready. So once you have that SAP platform ready in place where it's live, the users are active as well. I mean, that takes away the risk to the business as well. It's all running. And then it's the next phase where you uplift it, you upgrade it, add in new features.
Yeah, exactly, because that's what our foundation does. So if you were going to implement inventory management, you'd put in basics, you'd put in vanilla SAP inventory. Okay, you'd understand the as is, you understand the to be, you'd factor in the required outcomes, but you'd stay standard, and then you get them running, and then you'd have goods receipt, you'd have inbound, outbound movements, you do all that normal sort of like stuff you do within inventory. But and then they, like you say, they start to learn about inventory management, how SAP really works, and then you can start doing some continuous improvement around it as standard, and then get them to start to use the analytics better, start to use sort of like Joule better, all those types of things. I think that there was sort of like another point I sort of like wanted to sort of like cut across as well, which is you've got the newbies coming into the mid-tier SAP space, but I also see there's more and more existing ECC customers now thinking about moving to S/4HANA public cloud, because like you say, it's easier, cheaper, faster, but it's more aligned to the smaller SAP ERP user than sort of like S/4HANA PCE is. But I also starting to see more and more private equity carve-outs thinking about moving to S/4HANA public rather than PCE, just because of the simplicity. What do you see then?
Absolutely. I mean, especially this private equity space is quite interesting as well. So based on their business model, I think that's one of the challenge with these businesses as well. If I take a non-PE business, we still have some headroom in terms of the time. With these, the way the model operates, like you need to have that technology capabilities as fast as possible and align with the parent company. It makes a lot of sense to go with the public cloud option as well, because it's quite faster and cheaper as well, and it's a subscription. So anyone like especially the companies which are not big and they want to align as well. I think that's what I have came across as well. Looking at some of these businesses as well, I think the public cloud is the way for them to
Yep.
go, because that will help them, that will give them the edge faster, and that's what these the private equity companies are looking at as well, that they want faster value, much faster deployment,
Yeah.
and getting onto the platform pretty quick.
Yeah. I mean, okay. So let's just talk about one scenario. Okay. So I'm going to talk through a scenario.
Yeah.
And we both worked on the same carve out
Yeah.
a few years ago,
Yes.
which was highly problematic. Hence, we both ended up on it as turnaround consultants. But we've recently just done some work with a private equity carve out where the customers on ECC, and the biggest factor was the chasing the TSA. Okay.
Yeah.
So with a lot, what people don't realise is with carve outs, you're always chasing a finite end date.
Yeah.
Where you've got to be off of the old system and onto your own system. And normally that starts far too late. So we did a piece whereby we took an ECC onto S/4HANA Public, and we said, look, for you to accelerate the TSA so that we can actually get you on, we're going to do like a phase 0. And with our phase 0 now and our tooling, we were able to go in, look at the ECC, and we weren't allowed really to look at the ECC. You know, it's the normal, the seller doesn't want you anywhere near the system, which is fine. We had the data cut, but we basically, with our leap grade tooling, were able to set up the customer's own S4 Gold client, do the S4 blueprint, and define the target operating model in a month. And all of that time, there's no pre-commitment to SAP for licensing. So at the end of the month, the customer came away with a proper TOM, an SAP blueprint, scenario analysis, standardization analysis as well. So we've done everything. So one, they understand what the 2B is going to look like. 2, we were able to have a gold client ready to set up in S/4HANA Public. 3, we knew what the integration was going to look like. 4, we knew what the data migration was going to look like. And we also knew what the resource and capacity and capability issues were going to be. And it just meant that after sort of like 4 to 6 weeks, everyone really understood what they were going to get and how we were going to get there. And then we were able to actually accelerate the move on to S4 from an ECC so that they could be done within 4 months. You know, and that's really fast. And it's not to say that it isn't going to be a really bumpy hypercare. But within 4 to 6 months, we were able to take the whole thing and move it over, which I think is pretty phenomenal. And we can do that for ECC customers who are just thinking about moving to S4 or for quality carve-outs. What do you think about that?
Yeah. I mean, there are a couple of questions actually. I think that the points that you highlighted, I think there are a few things that I want to pick up from that. Is one of the other thing is as well is how much time do you think is generally it's taking now to get the contract ready as well with SAP, in terms of if somebody wants to do it public cloud, and in terms of the discovery, let's say they have completed it. Broadly, what do you see? How much time it's taking to get agreement with SAP?
I think with Grow, really quick.
Okay.
It could be because really quick, and I think the reason being is Grow is so much different from Rise, because Grow is a proper SaaS contract. Okay. So you know it's equivalent to NetSuite. So I think Grow is fantastic. Rise is, let's not talk about it. But I do think if you were to rock up tomorrow and spoke to SAP and said, look, I've got a customer who's looking to move on to S4 Public rather quickly, they would bite your hand off. Now, the issue is less about the commercials and more about standing up an environment for you. But with Grow, again, relatively quick. You don't have the same problems you do with Rise.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that's good. That's good to know.
I think the other thing is then to start to talk about, if you're going to do it, think about Signavio and LeanIX as well as part of that equation. Even though not particularly part of the Grow licensing model, you can still use the tooling and it's worthwhile. because that ability to look at the customers, the ability to look at Signavio and go in and look at what good looks like, the ability to use Lean IX to map out your enterprise architecture, it's just all good stuff. And if you're doing private equity, using Lean IX basically provides the acquirer with a proper warranty of what he's just acquired in terms of the target operating model and the enterprise architecture. It's good, powerful stuff. It's worth investing in. But yeah, I mean, there's a huge difference between the Rise and Grow, both in terms of commercials and in terms of ability to stand up. It could take, we were talking to someone the other day, it could take 6 to 12 months just to do the licensing on Rise.
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, I think it's a different ball game altogether. I've looked at the Rise structures. It's like 1,000+ lines on it, and there are so many different variants in terms of. Yeah, it's quite time consuming in terms.
And the worst thing is that you essentially, from the day you step into Rise architecture, you're paying for the whole bloody thing.
Yes.
And if it's going to take you 2 years to actually bring your business in, that's a bit of a nasty pill. I think Grow, even though you're paying for it all, you're able to get value from it very, very quickly. I think that's the real thing. You can gain real value from Grow really, really quickly.
Yeah, totally, because it's quite simplified compared to what Rise is offering as well. So that's absolutely true. I think the other question that comes in the mind is, I think we are looking from tech perspective. I think it's all good and fine. I think we can manage that. What's your view in terms of for a company which has never used SAP and now they're getting into using the SAP? How much time do they actually need to adopt this new tool in terms of trainings? Because that's quite key as well. One of the key thing that we have seen post go live is the change management and not having proper training could lead to some challenges due to hypercare as well. So how do we mitigate that aspect of the transformation?
Yeah, no, I think it's a good question. So what we do is, as part of our foundation, we have sort of like a business change bundle, which is very much focused on providing video-based training. So we very much believe in sort of like getting the business to record their own content so that it's there. So there are 2 products I like. Okay. So I think every organization needs to have standard operating procedures, whatever. So we know SAP will always deliver good process design docs, but I do think it's incumbent on the organization to have an SOP, because actually business continuity plan done as well. So I think you need to have good SOPs so you know how to run your business, and SAP is part of it. I think you need good video content, but I also think, look, one of the value adds of Grow and using SAP is the fact that you're going to have Jill and you're going to have WalkMe, and that combination is very, very powerful in terms of embedding sustaining the change, because the user is able to log on, they're able to understand what they're going to do. But if they don't know how to orchestrate a process, they can ask Jill, and Jill will then talk to WalkMe, and WalkMe will then demonstrate how they run the process. So it's a lot more. It's becoming a lot more intuitive. But that still doesn't mean you negate the use of business change management team. You're still going to need those people. You're still going to need floor walkers. You still need to do all the other things. It's just that WalkMe and Jill are great enablers for that. And I think the other thing you have to do from day one is not talk about SAP. One of the failure points we always see is you'll have a SAP program running, and there'll be S4 with everything under the bonnet in one block, and then for some reason MGD and Concur will be separate programs running. And MGG's master data, which should sit with S4, and Concur's travel and expense, which should sit with S4. It should be one program. So I think it's really important that you don't talk SAP language to the business. You just say, this is finance, this is FP&A, this is procurement, this is inventory. And you say, this is the inventory process. And you just talk process, and you use their language, and you just always talk the customer language. You just talk about the process, never talk about SAP. It just makes it so much easier to embed it, and also just constantly reiterating, SAP isn't tech. it's a best of breed target operating model that all the big global consultancies believe in and all the big companies leverage. So you're a fool not to take standard SAP because it's just so good.
Yeah.
You know? And that's the value, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Good. Good conversation as always. We'll get this out, and then I'll post some additional content with it.
Yeah.
What's your last thoughts on the mid-tier and SAP at the moment?
I mean, again, if I look at the SAP, I think that's where they want to become almost like a Salesforce kind of a model in future. What they're effectively doing is they are creating two parallel worlds in terms of like digital core and this BTP, and they want to have that one digital core for which the SAP is responsible for, like one unified kind of thing. So tomorrow, if they want to do an update in their digital core, they can easily go and do it without, and then in that way, they can get an upgraded version across all different customers at the same time, rather than the dependencies just with the client itself.
I see it slightly different now. I see the sort of like large customer base, sort of like that 40,000 customers who use ECCS4, okay, and then the wider business suite. That's never going to be a 100% SaaS model.
No,
it's not.
No.
But I think when you go to the mid-tier, you're exactly right.
Yes.
SAP are going to overtake NetSuite, I reckon, in 5 years. Well, SAP will be bigger than NetSuite in the mid-tier market.
That's what they're aiming, and they have been trying to do for a very long time.
Yeah, but I go back to one thing and one thing only. If they want to nail the mid-tier, the one thing they've got to do is they probably need to spend about $10 million and build out a load of standard interfaces, about 200 APIs for the most cherished cloud applications that the mid-tier love, because they're still going to want to use them. So you might as well just say, you want to use them. Here's our standard APIs, plug and play. Because I had to migrate a NetSuite company into a large global organization which only ran SAP. And it gave me the opportunity to see how NetSuite ran. And it was actually really very, very good. And one of the things which was so good was just the API, just through MuleSoft or standard point-to-point, just were like that. You know, you can set up Salesforce to NetSuite in like 5 minutes, mate. You know, and I just think that SAP just needs to say, look, here's 200 APIs. It's in our API catalog. Plug and play. Happy days. Do you know? And SAP could do the same stuff, but if you don't want to do it in SAP, don't care.
Yeah.
You know, and when you do, you do.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's my thought. Thank you very much, Jeet. As always, good conversation. And we'll do it again next month.
Brilliant. Thanks.